Welcome to the OddsBreakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 57 of 2021. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. Follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the OddsBreakers. Follow us on social media / the OddsBreakers. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag. For a 100% sign-up bonus, please visit MyBookie and use the promo code TheOddsBreakers. Terms, conditions, and location apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and projects to the website and the podcast, we'd love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. Pick any of our premium handicappers to get our plays before the line moves. You can also be a patron subscriber for only $10. Get some merchandise as well as the podcast a little early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. So, my friends, we have a pretty basic show today. No D Nasty, because he's getting a week off before we start fantasy football when the NFL comes back in roughly 10 days or so. Getting a nice break after preseason football, a little bit unprecedented because now we have 3 preseason games, which is fine. But having that break, there's probably still going to be a few more injuries. The good news is that now people drafting fantasy football don't have to worry quite as much as having that one more preseason game, a.k.a. J.K. Dobbins owners.
Unreal.
You know, he was one of the top guys. I mean, top 20 for me on my draft board coming in. And I'm glad that I didn't have any fantasy drafts until after that happened. My first draft happened on Sunday night after I got home from seeing all my colleagues and friends out in the Vegas area. So basically, Dobbins tore his ACL and maybe a little bit more. They're going to find out more information. But, I mean, that's just how Harbaugh plays. You know, always trying to win. And sure, he'll play with his backup quarterback at least. But he also plays a lot of key guys during the preseason. And he's gotten a couple nasty injuries from it. Irv Smith is banged up too. I actually grabbed Irv Smith in my draft after Mike Gesicki. I drafted Gesicki, and so I knew I could get Smith later. Maybe the meniscus issue isn't that bad. You know, if it happens to be a couple months, I can always drop him. There's a few other guys out there that I think are going to have great years, like Fursker, if you remember. So I'm kind of rolled the dice on the tight end position because I wanted to go more stronger in the running back and the receiver positions. But, you know, the price of winning sometimes in the preseason is can what get your team injured. Favorites went 13-1-1 straight up last weekend. 9-5-1 against the spread. This was a 1-3 weekend for myself in the preseason. I did not do well. Had some close ones, but heck, that's going to happen. It's our first year of preseason for me that has been profitable. So I just barely went back into the red for preseason football. So wasn't too happy about that, but I've seen some people get pretty blown out this preseason. So, happy to kind of leave where I was unit-wise. As far as MMA, that went well, 1-1, but the big plus 135 on the largest play certainly made it a good MMA weekend, and just our only play in college football loss to the UTEP team total over. And that was a sizable play for me. I thought that was an easy one. Unfortunately, New Mexico State couldn't score anything, which made them run the whole clock out in the fourth quarter. There was no points scored the whole fourth quarter, and they barely missed the team total by 4 points. It was just one of those situations where they had no pressure on them, and they kind of treated that game, UTEP did anyway, as putting some of their second and third stringers in towards the end. I got to catch a piece of the game, not too much because I was running around all over the place over the weekend, but that's what happened, and did my box score study, and really no competition in yards there. And these Monday podcasts are going to be the important ones. I record them Monday and Monday night sometimes, and they're out on Tuesday. Your box score analysis, usually get an early play from me, and of course fantasy football, but the box score analysis tells you your misleading final scores, right? Misleading final scores, very important, because a lot of times a score will reflect something, and it was just some bad turnover luck or something that the other team did, boneheaded, bad efficiencies that made them lose the game. 9 times out of 10, they would have won the game. There's one misleading final score over the weekend. And I'll be doing this in NFL football too. And later we're going to go over our betting spots. So, and this is why I wanted to do a quick podcast today, even though there wasn't many games, just to go over why we do betting spots. And it's because obviously teams could look ahead past the game if it looks easy to them and they have a big opponent like a rivalry on deck. It's a handicapping spot that you have to look at that favors the more inferior team. You either have to stay away from the game or bet the inferior dog in that situation. It's even hard to put a number on it. Some people put a couple points on it, maybe just one even, some people. I'm a little bit in the 2 area, just depends upon what it is, because I just think it's such a big spot later in the year when it comes to some of the rivalry weeks. But at the same time, it just takes a lot. I have to be off by a lot to still bet on that team, because we don't know for sure if they're going to let down. Maybe they just want to crush the team for whatever reason. But in general, they're going to rest their guys in the second half because they want to be fresh for the big game that's coming up the following week. That's important. And then if a little team beats a really big team, it's a letdown spot coming up next week. That's potential because, they're excited. They're full of themselves. They think they're better than they actually are. And mentally, people regress in that situation. The thing used to happen to me when I used to play pool. I used to play a lot of pool when I was younger. After I won and had a great game, I don't know why, I would never be able to win the next game for some reason. I couldn't hit the ball to save my life. I just think it's a subconscious thing that we all humans have to deal with. Does it work every time? No, of course not. Sometimes a bad team can win a couple games in a row, especially if they're against the ropes. So you got to look at every situation uniquely. But that's what I believe differentiates this podcast from a lot of other ones, is that we go into misleading data and spot data coming in. And I always have an article out when I do it. I kind of start the article with the bullet points, basically, as I'm preparing my box scores for my power ratings. It just kind of gets it all over at once. I'm already kind of thinking this in my head. I might also write it down for my listeners, right? That's the way I look at it. One misleading final score of the weekend, because I'll tell you this, UConn got trashed. I mean, Fresno took them out bad. And, they had to travel all the way across the country. It shouldn't have been that bad of a thing because it's their very first game. It's not like in the middle of the season, but still they got stomped, and they only put up like 100 yards, against Fresno State. Yeah, UConn put up 107 total yards. That's bad. And Fresno put up 538. Fresno could have kept going if they wanted to. 45-0. Nothing misleading there, but what it did make me do is really consider if I'm going to downgrade them lower than New Mexico State, because at least New Mexico State got 190 yards for their 3 total points that they scored. Pretty bad numbers for the couple of the worst teams that didn't even play last year. So keep that in mind. There's a lot of smart minds on that whole game over. I went with the team total, but New Mexico State just could not score the ball at all. San Jose State took care of Southern Utah 45-14. Somehow Southern Utah scored in the second quarter but couldn't score again. But that game was almost over by then anyway, because San Jose State was up by 38-14. And then they just had one of those last fourth quarters, once again, that they benched their players and not one team scored a point. So I wonder if some people got burned on the total of this game as well. Very possible. Now the elephant in the room. as you know, we are Big Ten fans here. Nebraska lost to Illinois 22-30. And this is a misleading final score. The reason that's a little bit misleading is because Nebraska was like on the 2-yard line of Illinois and threw an interception. And both of the teams were 1-1 in turnover ratio. But Nebraska's turnover was obviously more costly, leaving points on the table. And they outgained Illinois 392 yards to 326. Boneheaded mistakes. 5 for 14 on third down, but Illinois was 6 for 13. So Illinois edged them out there a little bit. Percentage. Nebraska went 1 for 2 under fourth down. Adrian Martinez did not look good. I don't know if they have a lot of other options, but one thing about Nebraska, their campus is going through a lot right now. There's a lot of protesting. If you haven't watched the news, there's some kids doing some college kid stuff that was illegal and terrible, and obviously innocent until proven guilty. But check that out. It was a distraction, and another part of the reason why I stayed away from this game. Lots of weirdness, but I didn't think Nebraska would lose outright. I thought that maybe they would win by 3, 6, 7 points. The spread was pretty much on 7 most of the time. But it was just a very tough game to bet in that situation. I didn't like Bielema, but he ended up winning this one. But there might be a point that we're going to miss out on fading him. Interestingly enough, they're favored at home by 6 points to UTSA. I'm not so sure about Illinois in this game either. And I'm going to seriously consider watching this blind to see where it goes, possibly later being a player on UTSA. I did upgrade Illinois a little bit in my power ratings for what happened last week. I had to a little bit. I know they outgained, but they showed more poise than I thought because I think I had Nebraska at 7.25 points. I downgraded Nebraska more than I upgraded Illinois. Put it down that way. Yeah, Nebraska, and you have to watch out on those misleading scores later in the year. You don't necessarily downgrade them at all. But in this situation, they just looked haphazard. And, from a quarterback number is where they got hit from me, from the quarterback side of Nebraska. And you just got to think also that Scott Frost is going to be on the hot seat.
So hot right now.
So the final game was UCLA versus Hawaii, right? I'm sorry, as I'm looking for this here. Yeah, UCLA, Hawaii. Hawaii did not look good against them at all. They were down 24-3 right in the first quarter, 31-3. Then they finally got a touchdown in the third, but UCLA scored 13 points, and we had another non-scoring fourth quarter this weekend. Lots of dead fourth quarters. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson didn't even have to throw the ball much. Only 130 yards passing to Cordero's 220. But the rushing was out of this world. UCLA, Charbonnet, transferred in from Michigan, I believe, 106 yards rushing. Brown had 78 yards rushing. Keegan Jones, 8 for 26. Thompson Robinson, 3 for 16. All he had to do was hand off the ball the whole day. And that's what they pretty much did. So you don't get a huge read on UCLA, but now you know that they can run the ball a little bit more. But their defense seemed to be pretty good. Thought that was interesting. I expected Hawaii to do a lot more than this. A lot more than just 10 points. A lot more than 243 total passing yards and 269 total yards. Okay? 26 rushing yards to 244. Now, that line moved down against LSU. And if you remember my show with Kyle Hunter, we gave out UCLA +4. It's down to +3 in a lot of these books. So we have some line value. Now, I'm not going to necessarily make any moves unless it gets lower than the 3. Maybe be a smaller percentage buyback. But at the same time, I think UCLA can win this game. Okay? So that's the issue. When it comes to buying back, you should always do it in between the three, especially if it's a clean one, unless it's something major like a quarterback injury. And then you still question it, but the line would move a lot more if that was the case. But I mean, this UCLA play is going to be really interesting with LSU just getting their feet wet here with a new quarterback. So in this show, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the lines. Just kind of go through them a little bit. Nothing too crazy, but obviously college football is coming this weekend. We have a massive guest for you on our next show. Someone who's never been on this show, but someone you guys all know very well. So I'm excited to bring that person on for Wednesday/Thursday morning's show. Not going to tell you who it was. It's going to be a surprise. So you'll find out Thursday morning. But let's get into a little bit of just a couple of these games we want to touch on. Temple versus Rutgers. Rutgers is 14 points here ahead of Temple, and my number is about 16. If I'm going by my power ratings. Not sure if I want to grab Rutgers right now. I mean, there's a lot of people on Rutgers that I know of. Just a lot of people are trying to fade Temple. I mean, Temple's such a poor team this year that we think. That could always change. But not a huge fan of Rod Carey myself. And Rutgers is supposed to be a lot better with Schiano. So that's why you're getting that play from a lot of people. Boise State, Central Florida, +5 to -5. Staying the hell away from this game. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Central Florida won. But I also wouldn't be shocked if Boise State comes in there and beats them like they did Florida State last year. Boise State's made this trip to Florida a couple times now, I think. So they're somewhat used to that, aren't they? App State, -10 against East Carolina. That's another one that's pretty close to my number. Probably going to stay away from that one a little bit. South Florida, +18.5 against NC State. I would not be shocked if NC State gets this total themselves. It's at 59 right now. Very high total. The problem with South Florida is you wonder if they can score the ball this year. Will this be like a 58-0 type game? Because that's what's been happening recently in college football, as you've seen, when a better team has been playing an inferior team. I wouldn't call South Florida as bad as New Mexico State or nothing, but they sure as heck didn't press last year. And if you remember, when I said that Jordan McLeod transferring to Arizona is like the poor leaving the projects for the slums, I was pretty serious about that. I don't have any faith in this South Florida team. Yeah, my number's exactly 19 here. So, pretty close. And then we have Bowling Green versus Tennessee. Tennessee's -35.5. My number's not quite that high. It's up there. But this is one of those games that we don't even know if Bowling Green's the score. This could be another one of those 41-3 games. Or it could be a 35-10, right? Too much variance for me with the changing of the coaches. Obviously for Tennessee there, Josh Heupel. You have a total of 60.5 points. I'm going to lean the under. Even though that Tennessee's going to be playing faster, a lot faster with Heupel, I don't know if it's going to be this game that they do it. But I won't be taking the under just because of his reputation. I just lean the under because I don't know if Bowling Green will score. Next team, Ohio State versus Minnesota. Now, this is the one I've been eyeing up for Thursday night. More than anything, I would seriously consider taking a piece of Minnesota in the first half. I think this spread's going to move a lot, and I think it's going to go in Ohio State's direction. I think it's going to close at 17. So that means you're going to get probably like a +9 or maybe even a +10 for Minnesota by the time this game kicks off. It's going to be a very public game, in my opinion. Big Ten game like this on a Thursday. So I'm going to be looking at that one a little bit more once the line closes. So for this weekend, we're going to get into more of these Friday and Saturday games on the next podcast. So I do want to talk a little bit about NFL, but before I get into the NFL, I do want to give out a play, and I am going to take Kansas State against Stanford here. They're laying about 2.5 points. I found a clean one, but it's creeping up a little bit. Now, here's the thing. This is the one Kyle liked as well. This was his play, and I agreed with him. Stanford lost their quarterback, right? Mills, and he went to the NFL, drafted by the Texans. So, big change for them. But I just don't like how David Shaw's been starting out. Last year started bad. He ended really good. He beat some teams like UCLA at the end, like at Oregon State, 27-24, Washington 31-26, Cal 24-23. So, this is a team that started bad with Shaw and ended up doing better because their first game they lost at Oregon 35-14, and then a Colorado loss at home that made no sense, 35-32. Now, what's important, a lot of these scores were misleading for them last year because Stanford was actually minus 0.56 in yards per play. So, lots of changes with them. But Kansas State, coming in, Chris Kleiman has got another year on his belt, and he still gets to retain his quarterback, Skylar Thompson. This is the same team that beat Oklahoma last year early. Now, they collapsed, had a ton of injuries last year. They lost 5 in a row. They lose their first game against Arkansas State, then they win at Oklahoma, Texas Tech, at TCU, then Kansas, and then lost 5 in a row. Had some, I think there was some COVID issues too, but it was definitely some injury issues. Kept up with Oklahoma State, and Baylor was a really close game too. Now, what I do like about this game is that they are in Cowboy Stadium. Well, AT&T Stadium, right? They're playing, it's almost like a home game for them because there's going to be a hell of a lot of Kansas State people coming down to that game to see it. It's kind of like an event type game. So, you're going to have the Big 12 type atmosphere there. Stanford's going to be a little bit out of place. This is a spot where I think Kansas State is the team to back just because production-wise, percentage, they seem to return more. A lot of the guys they are playing on defense aren't returning starters, but there's a lot of guys that played last year. They played because, part of the reason was because a lot of their starters were hurt. So you don't call them returning starters. You just called it at the actual production of the defense. So we're going to play them minus 2.5 for a couple stars.
Freaking niggas every way like MJ.
All right, let's get into a little NFL then. Talk about some of the openers here. I'd hardly call them openers because most folks have had week 1. We've already made 4 plays, I believe, for NFL week 1. But wanted to just talk a little bit about the preseason, how it ended. You can't take a lot of this preseason. You can't take a ton of information. There's teams that just looked really bad, and then all of a sudden they looked really good. Even the Jaguars looked good for a game. That last game, of course, was against Dallas, who actually looked really bad. But I have Dallas pretty low in the power ratings, and we haven't seen really any Dak, so not much at all. So it's hard to figure that out. And when in these situations, you don't want to mess with it, okay? And just not many changes to my power ratings coming into it. But what I will say is that I think there's a couple teams that are going to come in a little bit underrated. Just starting out with the Dallas versus Tampa Bay. We took Tampa Bay at the minus 6.5, I believe, and that number's long gone. Yeah, this game's at 7.5 right now. Moved roughly 30 cents of value, at least 6.5 to 7.5. But what I will say is, even at 7.5, this is a pretty big power ratings discrepancy for this. I have Tampa Bay as the second best team. 7.5 is better than the average team, and maybe I'm just really low on Dallas. Maybe I'm not accounting for Dak, but I have this as more like a 12 or 13 point line. That's how off I am. I'm a little worried about it. you know? So I went to another trusted power rating site, Team Rankings, and their number's not that far off from mine. I mean, they have Tampa Bay 7.1 points better than the average team, and they have Dallas at 0.4. Okay? So that's almost at 10 points if you look at the power rating with the home field advantage of Tampa Bay. If you look at what Sagarin had last year, so I don't think his NFL's up this year, it's over 10 points. Now, of course, that was without Dak, but it still goes to show you that I'm not that far off compared to them. I am definitely lower on Dallas, though, than most of them I'm noticing, so I'm going to be a little bit careful with that. You know, not saying that I'm not going to try to get the value if I think my value's correct, but at least I have something to compare it to. I think it's important to do that. This next game, Pittsburgh at Buffalo, minus 6.5. Total is 49. Whew, that's a big one. For a Pittsburgh team that, started off 10-0, 11-0 last year. Of course, records don't mean anything nearly as much as, your strength schedule. So I still think this could be slightly high, what I'm looking at. I'm going to see what happens here. I think maybe more players will come in on Buffalo. I think I have Buffalo as my third best team. Yep, third best team. And I have Pittsburgh not that low. I have Buffalo 3.5 points better. So on a neutral, it's about 3.5 point spread, right? And then in Buffalo, that might be a 3.5 advantage. I have them written down. That's about 7 points. So first game of the season, though, and it's not a far travel spot for Pittsburgh. So that thing might be right on the nose, actually. Next game, want a quick look at the Jets versus the Panthers. We made a play on the Panthers at -4. It's at -4.5 at this book that I'm looking at here, my bookie. And I think this is still way too low. I know that they have a nice new shiny quarterback, but this is the Sam Darnold revenge game. Maybe he stinks, but he's going to play out of his mind this game is what you have to think. Mitch Trubisky kind of put one on the Bears when he had an opportunity to do it. So it's like that. But even without that, I still have a bigger power rating discrepancy. My power rating discrepancy on this game itself, and I don't have Carolina that high. I have them below an average team at -1.25, but I still have the Jets at -7. So 5.75 points of difference on a neutral. This is my second biggest power rating discrepancy here. I'll be making my adjustments if I'm wrong. Next game, Jacksonville versus Houston. It's about where we took it at -3 plus money. And not as much of a fan of it as I was before. Houston's looking somewhat manageable, and now this is preseason, so you don't know. But Jacksonville went through a lot of new changes themselves. I tried to grab some line value, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get much line value here. I still think you might get some more players on the Jaguars. Thank goodness for their final preseason game that they had there. Looks like the Chargers are road chalk by a point against the Washington football team. I do have Chargers a better team power rated wise over Washington, but not by that much. It's I still think Washington should be the slight favorite there. So interesting spot for that. Neither are at the 3 though. None, my ratings don't bring it up to 3, of course, because only 3 points for home field advantage in Washington, if that even. Next one, we have the Eagles at the Falcons. Falcons are -3.5. I wish that I could fade both of these coaches on week 1, but unfortunately they're playing each other. So probably just a straight stay away from me. Minnesota at Cincinnati. Minnesota road chalk at -3.5 points. I mean, this is Kirk Cousins' spot here, right? Still worried about Burrow. in my opinion. But what I will say is the Vikings have looked pretty bad into this preseason, even from last year in general. And so it's pretty big road chalk points there, but my power rating is really close to this anyway. San Francisco, -7.5, road chalk at Detroit. This is definitely the biggest road chalk game past the 7. Really good team supposedly against Detroit. This one's a scary one, in my opinion, no matter which way you go. Did Jared Goff take anything from what he's learned against Shanahan with him to Detroit? I mean, you'd think so. Something there about his defense, It's Detroit's kind of like, hey, we're not going to be that bad type game. They're probably going to give it their all. San Fran probably very motivated. Think they got cheated last year. Lean Detroit. I don't care if my power ratings say it or not. You're past a 7 and a key number of 7 in this situation. Detroit is my 30th worst team. San Francisco is in the top 12. And my power rating is actually 7.5, so I can't do nothing with it anyway. Let's move on to Cleveland versus the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, I talked about this one plenty. This number's a really good number in my opinion. I actually lean the Chiefs, but nothing I would want to take. I could certainly see the back door open against the soft Chiefs defense. You remember how awful they were against the spread the last half of the season. And more even. I think it was last 10 games or so. New England -2.5 against the Dolphins. This thing's already all the way almost up to 3. New quarterback Tua. Fitzmagic started this same game last year in New England. And Fitzmagic lost this game. And he threw a stupid interception at the end where they could have went ahead, which drove me nuts because I actually took a shot with Miami last year. So I am actually going to be staying away from this game in general until I learn a little bit more about the starting quarterback and a little bit more about the Dolphins as well with Tua. I tried to watch some of it, but obviously they played the Bears. I was able to watch the full game. I want more information there before I start making plays on them. The Broncos versus the Giants. Broncos road chalk -1.5, and it's because how well their preseason looked. Teddy Bridgewater's the starter. It's looking like anyway. I believe Fangio said that, but that's what I expect. And yeah, he did. And then Locke's going to be sitting in the back waiting for his opportunity to, try to shine. But the Giants, they're a desperate team this year. The Broncos look fantastic in preseason football, but that's preseason football. You can be absolutely fooled by things like that. And some players don't even play as well as they do in the preseason. In the regular season, that's like Peterman. He looked like amazing in the preseason and was terrible in the regular season. So, no opinion on that one. I mean, the Giants are a higher power rated team. No, sorry, Denver's the higher power rated team, but it's not like a huge discrepancy. This game is in New York, so I would probably, if I was making the line according to my power ratings, I would make it a New York Giants -2.5 points. That's as far as I would go with it personally. But between the threes, really no opinion on that one as much. Green Bay, -3 points. Saints +3 at home. And this is a situation where you have Jameis Winston starting. And there's so many opinions on this. Is he fixed or is he not? Probably best to wait this out. Now, I would lean the Saints if you had to make a play because they're at home. But at the same time, the Packers are coming in. They didn't get to play in the preseason much, but I don't think they needed to because Rodgers to Adams is just so well-rounded. Rodgers knows Cobb very well that they picked up. I'm sure they practiced plenty. Yeah, I know he came in late, but so what? He'll be fine. This is probably a really good number on this game as well. Baltimore -4.5 at the Raiders. This is another good line, I think. The Raiders, lots of people fading them this year. A lot of people don't like Carr, but even with the injuries to Baltimore, they still should be good enough with Lamar there to score whenever they want. And that's why you have a pretty high total here of 51 points. I'm going to delve into the totals a little bit more later this week, but I'm looking at the Ravens here, and I'm going to lean the Ravens, even though I probably won't play it. Let's look at my power ratings on this one. We got the Raiders minus a little bit below average. I'm actually surprised that I have them pretty close to average. And then I have the Ravens about 4.5 points better on a neutral. Sorry, 5.5 points better. So actually, my power ratings would favor the Raiders here, but I just can't trust the Raiders with Gruden there. We also can't give the Raiders full 3 points for home field. There's going to be a lot of talk about the Raiders Stadium and all the people coming to visit them, trying to get into the games. A lot of people are saying that this is a Knights town, not a Raiders town. And I would think 1.5 points might be just fair enough in this situation. Now, you never know what the players are going to do when they get to Vegas. You don't know if they're going to be stupid. They're young. They're going to have fun, and they feel impervious to everything. I'm sure we all remember those days. And if you're already young, congratulations if you listen to this. But at the same time, 1.5 is fine. If it's a 5.5 point difference, you're looking at a 3.5 spread. So going to be missing this one here. Moving on to the final game, you have the Bears +7 at the Los Angeles Rams. And this was another early play that we made on the Chicago Bears. Just a small play we played the Rams. But I think we had a better number here at -7. And it's a little bit juiced at this book now. I think you're going to see some 7.5s. But if you like the Rams, take it now because you're going to miss out on this number. And a lot of people think Dalton's going to completely shit the bed when he gets to this games against a guy like Aaron Donald. But yeah, who knows? Maybe Dalton, all of a sudden, something snaps with him. But I'd have to bet against that. I would say there's probably an 80% chance that he's not that good. And this spread's going to be won or lost in the very end of this game. When it's a little bit garbage time. Or I think that, who knows, maybe Stafford's the one that chokes. I think it's a 20% chance Dalton does well, 80% chance he doesn't do well. I think Stafford's going to be fine because he's played against the Bears. That was part of the reason why I did take it at the 7. And my power ratings actually agreed with that because I have the Bears as a slightly below average team. And I have the Rams not as high as what everybody else does, but I do have them about 5.25 points ahead of the average team. So that would give them, with a little bit like 2-point home field advantage at their place in LA, you're looking at about a 7.5 to 8 point spread here, I would think, right? If you have the Bears at minus, let's just say, a half point. But that's all I have for you guys because that's all the lines that are out. There's still a lot more questions coming on. How healthy is Wentz? I heard he just got COVID. COVID's going to play a part of this season. It's going to play a part with vaccinated and unvaccinated players because apparently vaccinated people are getting in at just about the same rate. Now, if it works better for the seriousness of it, great. But there's not a ton of information yet about any of this. And I think a lot of players are a little bit timid. And I think this whole thing is somewhat unpredictable. So you're going to get burned at some point, and then you're going to get lucky too. But just hope more often than not that you don't get as burned as you get lucky in these situations. I think you might want to grab a few lines that come out early, if they're very off. Because of the whole fact that you can get it burned or lucky, it just creates more variance in the whole situation itself, which is not valuable to you. I mean, obviously, if everything worked to a T, you shouldn't lose anything. You should never lose a bet unless you were completely wrong. So I think you got to look at both sides of the coin, and maybe if you're still unsure of a side, you can waiting might be a better thing to do in some of these cases. Now, I always preached getting early and getting very late is the best thing to do. Always lean on the early side. Maybe this year you lean a little bit more on the later side if it's not a big difference. And if you still need to gather info, wait on the game. Wait till like a Saturday in case somebody pops out for being sick, any injuries you're not sure of, and anything that could take out a key player for a game that you want to make a play on. My friends, if you have any questions about any of the games coming up, feel free to tweet us at the OddsBreakers. I'd love to break one down for you on this podcast. Everyone, have a fantastic rest of your week and go get some winners.